say. Actually, first of all, let me chant a few prayers, a few mantras. Om Vishnu Bhagavan Krishna Prastham Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurani Pujani Namo Vishesha Shunyavadi Bhastyatya Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha, Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Now this thing is not working any longer. So, friends, devotees and friends, we were going to do this out in the garden, but I was afraid it was going to rain, and it's what happened last Saturday, actually. It started raining. We had to move everyone under cover and carry on, and it was a disruption. Yeah, so anyway, hope you're okay enough. You'll survive. Yeah. Anyway, in a little while we'll all stand up so you'll be able to stretch and move around a bit. Okay, so here goes. Here's a verse, just for starters, from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Nama Chintamani Krishnas Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shudho Nitya Mukto Binatwan Nama Namino, which means the holy name of Krishna is transcendentally blissful. It bestows all spiritual benedictions, for it is Krishna himself, the reservoir of all pleasure. Krishna's name is complete, and it is the form of all transcendental mellows. It is not a material name under any condition, and it is no less powerful than Krishna himself. Since Krishna's name is not contaminated by the material qualities, there's no question of its being involved with Maya, means illusion. Krishna's name is always liberated and spiritual. It is never conditioned by the laws of material nature. This is because the name of Krishna and Krishna himself are identical. Anyway, that's just some food for thought. Very nice verse, very beautiful verse actually, going into, like some deeper aspects of mantra meditation. And before we go into some deeper aspects, let me just mention a little bit. Sri Nityananda Prabhu was saying how I was in New Zealand. Well, yes, I was born and raised in New Zealand, in Auckland. And it was April 1972. I was there, I was studying. To be quite, I don't know if I should be so frank, but to really be frank, I was a very half-hearted student. And to be even more frank, I dropped out after a while because different reasons. But one day, I was walking through the ground. One day in April, it was sort of 12th or 14th or something of April 72. Where were you on the 12th or 14th of April 72? In your previous lifetime, perhaps. Yeah, so I was walking through the grounds of the university. It was kind of early-ish in the morning, sort of 9 or 10 maybe. And I heard a sound like little bells ringing. Something like that, at least to my, untrained ear and unfamiliar ear. That's what it sounded like, coming from my right-hand side. So I looked over, and there, walking more or less towards me, was Prabhupada. Now, we don't have a picture of him. We're here.
It was to the side. Do you want me to bring it? My mom's already getting up.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. All right. So anyway, there's Prabhupada, person who brought Vedic culture from India to the Western world. He came in 65, actually. Okay, yeah. This is Prabhupada here. He came over from India in 1965 and he landed in New York. And he started presenting Krishna consciousness, or in a broader sense, Vedic culture. Vedic is the name or term for the literatures, the spiritual literatures of India. And unlike, those of us here who are from Christian backgrounds, I think so many are, or maybe someone's from an Islamic background, where you just essentially get one book. But in the Vedic tradition, you get a whole library. I mean, it's a mega library. You might be surprised to hear this, but you see there's a row of books there kind of taking up the whole topish row, almost top, and beneath there's like half or 2/3 of a row. My dear friends, would you believe it? That's one book. I'm serious. It's actually one book. Yeah, 18,000 or 17,500 verses, Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's not one of the big ones. So, you get this whole, it's truly a library of literature and spiritually focused from different perspectives. It's not all just sort of straight in your face, but it's like there's a lot of subtlety to it and different perspectives for different types of people from different backgrounds and just in different situations in life and different ideas about life. So Prabhupada brought that tradition from India at that time, 65. By that time, not a lot, but some people had come from India to America and to England. Not a large number, but some. But none of them came to give this spiritual culture. I mean, practically, at least extremely few. Vivekananda, one gentleman, came in the 30s, just before the Second World War. But other than him, well, there was the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. He was sort of around. But otherwise, 99.99 something of the percent of the people who'd come to the West from India, they just came to make money. Yeah, that was it. So, but Prabhupada came to give the spiritual culture. And so he landed there in New York. After a while, he went to England. Well, he went New York, then he went to San Francisco, then he went to Canada, Montreal, and then in 68 he went to England. And, well, he went to England, but some of three families, three couples, one of which had a very, very young daughter, they went from San Francisco to London first. And one of them, his name is Shamsunda, from San Francisco. He was part of the hippie scene, like a real integral part, and one of the leaders of the hippie scene in San Francisco, which, if you're familiar with that history, you would know, mid-60s, the hippie thing was really huge. It was absolutely massive. Yeah, just tens of millions of young people were involved, to different degrees. So, but San Francisco for a while was the capital, and that was where he was from. So he knew, all the important, prominent people from the hippie scene. Like, have you ever heard of Grateful Dead? Well, you would, because you're not a young man. Did you hear of Grateful Dead? I'm not surprised. I mean, I don't know if you really missed so much, but he knew them extremely well. And, perhaps an unlikely person, what's his name? Sonny Barger. Did you ever hear of Sonny Barger? The founder of Hell's Angels. Yeah. He just died about a year ago, or 6 months even, Sonny Barger. And he really appreciated Krishna consciousness. He really liked it, even though he's kind of a bizarre character. So all these people, and many others from that scene, and some of them knew the Beatles, like Grateful Dead. They knew the Beatles. They weren't, on that scale of popularity, but they were not too far off it. So when Shamsunda and these devotees went to England, he was able to meet the Beatles through those people. And George Harrison, they were all very interested in these things. In those days, to not be interested in Indian meditation, yoga, and all that, to not be interested was really quite uncool. Oh yeah, it was. So we got to meet them, and they were all quite interested, particularly George Harrison, who really was extremely interested and, actually really got into it and would still be alive. But unfortunately, George, nice chap, really nice fellow, but he was addicted to smoking cigarettes. He was an addict, and therefore he died, young, 56 or something. Yeah. So anyway, I was there at the university in 1972, and at the end, sometime in 1969, George Harrison helped those Hare Krishna devotees in London make a record of the Hare Krishna mantra, which was number 1 on the hit parade. And I was a real hit parade person, I tell you what. Gee whiz. Yeah, I was really part of the culture. So I heard it was top of the hit parade in New Zealand. And so I heard it, and heard it, and heard it, and all my friends heard it. Then I sort of forgot about it. But then, a couple of years later, 1972, I was walking through the university. I heard the sound of little bells ringing. It was, you've heard them today. They're called cartels. And I looked over, and there was Prabhupada walking straight towards me, almost straight towards me. And he walked past me into the center, the quadrangle in Auckland University. And there was a little stage there, and he sat on the stage with the others. There are several of them, young people. And there were these two young girls, they're probably like 20-ish, one on either side of him, and they were dancing like really gracefully. It was just so beautiful and like really sweet and gentle and genteel. It was really quite moving, actually. And as they're dancing, they're throwing rose petals in front of the feet of Prabhupada as he walked in my sort of direction. And this thought just popped into my head. This must be like heaven. It was not a preconceived thought. It's not like I thought about it and I thought, yeah. But it was just suddenly there. Because it was. It was really like that. So anyway, then he went and he sat down on this little stage, very like a foot off the ground or maximum 18 inches. And he started singing Hare Krishna. They had been singing as they're walking up past me, but I didn't catch it, what they were singing. And so then Prabhupada started singing, and I understood, oh, this is Hare Krishna. Oh, I see. And I thought, some of you will find this amusing. Some of you mightn't get it. But I thought, maybe he's Krishna. Not exactly. But, what did I know? I was just a young fellow. And then, so anyway, the program went on, and if you look it up, if you know where to look, you can find a transcript of that lecture. It's very interesting. He's addressing the students, and telling them not to waste their lives, but to really have a spiritual aspect at least, or even foundation in their lives. So then a few months later, I dropped out. I never really dropped in. I actually worked as a journalist before, and then I went to university. I thought, I might as well go for a while. But I was a journalist, and I used to road test motor cars for newspapers. Anyway, so then I decided to go to England. My brother had gone to England. So I went by ship. In those days, flying was not so common. I went by ship, and I went first of all to Sydney, and I stayed in Sydney for a while. And dear friends and devotees, I don't know if you'd be surprised to hear this, but I was, you could say, a member of the surfing community. I really was. I definitely was. And I was staying with some friends there who are members of the surfing community, just on the northern side of Sydney. And there was one Hare Krishna devotee. Well, there was one of the leading surfers in the world who became like a full-fledged Hare Krishna devotee and still is. His name is Ted Spencer. Yeah, Ted Spencer. He was a big man in the surfing community. And he became a devotee. He really did. So you know what he did? He gave one of the young hangers-on. In every field you get the hangers-on. So one of the hangers-on His name was Spider. So he gave Spider a big sweet, handmade, homemade. It was about this big. No kidding. And he told him, take it to all the surfers on the north shore, the north side of Sydney, and get them all to take a bite. So we were up, quite well up the north side of Sydney, Palm Beach, and by the time Spider arrived, the big sweet was about that size. I mean, it was still fairly big. And it had many tooth marks on it. And he knocked on the door. We opened the door and he walked in and he said, listen, Ted Spencer says, you must all take a bite of this. And I looked at it and I thought, what? Are you kidding me? Or are you serious? So anyway, we had to take a bite, so we took a bite. That was the first sanctified food I had. Yeah, prasadam. So then afterwards I went by ship from Sydney to Melbourne to Perth to Durban to Cape Town. I went up to the top of Table Mountain. And yeah, that was kind of mid-72 or later 72. And I arrived in London in, I think it was about the 10th or so of December 72. And, I already had interest. I was very interested in, philosophy, because that was what I was studying at university. I was really interested in philosophy. And in fact, Prabhupada, when he spoke there at the university, I struggled to understand because of his accent, but I understood because I'd been educated in an Anglican school from the day after I turned 5 years old. Because in New Zealand, you start school when you turn 5. So yeah, from the age of 5 till when I graduated, the equivalent of matric, I just turned 17. I'd been in this Anglican school. And we went to chapel every day. And we had, they were called divinity classes, 3 times a week or something. So, I was fairly experienced with these things, you could say. I was going to say indoctrinated, but, that's not so nice. See, it's good we came inside, isn't it? That was a good move. Yeah, so, I was very familiar with these things. I was very familiar with these things, but I was a bit of a, there was a movie back, actually, just before my time, James Dean, Rebel Without a Cause. I was a rebel without a cause. I just sort of rebelled against anything just for the sake of it. Sometimes I rebelled against rebelling too. So, even though I heard so much over those 12 years of every day, I just, I thought Christ was really nice, but some of the ideas and some of the people I wasn't so impressed with, shall we say. So, but Prabhupada was giving this talk at the university. There I was listening. And I recognized, hey, he's talking about God. Oh, okay. But what he's saying makes sense. Wow, it's logical. It's not just believing in things, which was more sort of what I was used to. So I was very impressed. I was really very impressed. And so anyway, then I ended up in London, and I went and visited the Hare Krishna temple in London, sort of maybe a week after I arrived or something. And then I started going regularly, and they invited me to come and stay. Well, I actually found out the person in charge was a distant cousin of mine. Oh, Haribol. Comment ça va? Yeah. So yeah, he's a distant cousin of mine. Our family has its roots in Scotland. And he invited me to stay. He was in charge. He invited me to stay. And I was very much into, are things in life planned? Who you meet and what happens in your life. Is there a hand behind the scenes? I mean, it's sort of almost a form of paranoia, actually. Someone's watching you all the time. But when I met him and he was in charge, and he was a distant cousin of mine with the same obscure old Scottish surname, I thought, wow, it's meant to be. So I decided to come and stay as a guest. I moved in on the 7th of January, 73, as a guest, and I'm still there as a guest. So anyway, that was just a little sort of light interlude rather than the heavy stuff, the logic and arguments and whatever. But there are a couple of things I wanted to address, and just because I think they're interesting about mantra meditation. They're very interesting to me, and I think generally. And where to begin? Well, okay, let's begin with, before I went to university, I was still working as a journalist, so I was only probably 19 or something. I was very interested in these things because so many of the young people were really interested in these things. And transcendental meditation, if you're familiar with that, TM, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, it was quite popular, quite to very, and the Beatles first got into that actually, but then they kind of got out of TM after a while. So I got initiated in TM. That, I think, was probably 71. Yeah. So I went to the place, their headquarters somewhere in Auckland, and said, yeah, here I am. I want to get initiated. So the fellow said, okay, fine, no problem. You have to give a donation. And I only had $10 on me, New Zealand. And so I said, okay, sure, here, take my $10. He said, well, people normally give more. Seriously, that's what happened. And I said, well, that's all I've got. So I said, oh, all right then. So he gave me a mantra. He said, this is your private mantra, it's yours. Don't tell it to anyone. Later, I knew a few people from there, and so later we were discussing, and someone said, what's your mantra? And I said, well, it's this. Actually, it was Aim. And that person said, oh, that's my mantra too. Really. And it turned out that there were like 4 of us there. We all had that same mantra. And it made me a little skeptical. And, particularly when he initiated me, and he told me, after a month you'll experience this, after 3 months that, and after 6 months you'll realize that you're God. And I'll be quite honest, I don't want to be sort of critical, but, this is just what actually happened. He said I would become God. And I thought, me, God? Come on. Give me a break, will you? I would not make a good God. But, yeah, so I was kind of half-hearted about it. So, but anyway, talking about the meditation and types of, and levels even of meditation, that meditation that we were taught there, it was silent. You just do it in your mind. And, like I said, you're not meant to tell anyone, even the other practitioners. You're not meant to know, they're not meant to know your mantra. So, I know it works for some people because I've met, I know people in spiritual circles around the world. I'm fairly well acquainted. So, I've seen it works for some people. They get into it, they get focused, and they feel satisfied with it. But I know quite a number, including me. I was part of the whole hippie thing, including, certain things which I shouldn't even mention, which I won't even mention, but I was heavily absorbed in the whole subculture. And I couldn't focus on this. I couldn't, honestly. But I tried. I really tried. Because I was not really a sort of a happy chappy at that time. I was really questioning life and people and governments and me and just the world and what's going on. Yeah. And that was one of the main reasons I got into it, because I wanted to become more peaceful. But it didn't work. And I remember sitting in a party in a city called Hamilton. It's just south of Auckland. It's near a famous surfing spot called Raglan. Anyway, we'll not get into that. Sitting there, and they're playing, I forget who it was exactly, but it was either the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin or somebody like that. And I'm sitting, trying to sit cross-legged and trying to chant Aim, and I just couldn't focus. I just couldn't do it. I was just too distracted. And at that point I realized, listen, I think I'm wasting my time with this. Like I said, I've seen people, I know people for whom it works. It seems to work. At least they're peaceful, kind of clear-headed people. But it was a battle for me. So I needed something stronger, you could say. So, yeah. So then I went to England and I was visiting the Hare Krishna temple. And, when the record came out a couple of years before, we were all singing it, some of the time. And then what the hit parade's like, the things are popular, then they just drop off and they're forgotten. So then we just sort of forgot about it too. So I got to London and visiting the temple every day, pretty much. And then a different idea of meditation was introduced to me. Because, meditation in India, if you go to India, like everybody knows about meditation. It's not like an esoteric thing or an unusual thing at all. It's kind of just run-of-the-mill yoga meditation. It's like every housewife does it almost. Yeah, it's just extremely common. And not like, oh, you do meditation? Really? Not like that at all. So, but there are different ways of doing meditation. And the way they introduced to me was not silent meditation within the mind, where, particularly if you were like what I was, I had a sort of overactive mind, you could say, worrying about life. Because there, when you're doing that silent meditation, if your mind is not already sufficiently sort of calm, at least to a reasonable, like fairly good degree, you won't be able to do it because you'll just get sidetracked. You'll just get distracted. Yeah. So, but now they're different. There's a number of different types of meditation, ways of doing meditation. And the one which Prabhupada taught was audible meditation on audible sound vibration, not within the mind, but so you can hear it. And the thing is that, at least according to the Vedic culture and the Vedic scriptures, sound, the sense of hearing as a sense, and sound as a sensory experience, it's the strongest. Yeah. And an example which is given is if you got a person who's sleeping, like over there, for example, then how are you going to wake up that person? Because the person's over there, so you can't touch them. And, so the sense of touch won't help. Sense of smell won't help. Sense of taste won't help. Yeah, so what's going to help is sound. If you make some sound, enough sound, you'll wake the person up. And the sort of bottom line or the principle underlying that is that the sense of hearing is the strongest sense, and sound is the strongest sensory experience. And therefore, in the Vedic literatures, it says that the creation begins with sound. It doesn't start, with bricks and, earth and putting stuff together to make things. It begins with sound, and then gradually comes solid things eventually, and planets and species and all these things. So sound occupies a very special place in sensory experiences. And of course, we sort of only have our senses for perceiving things. Yeah. And I was just looking today, from my Anglican background, my biblical background, I remembered the verse. I'm absolutely sure some of you are from Christian backgrounds to one degree or another. And you know the one. It's from John. It may even be John 1:1. But it goes, in the beginning was the Word. You know that one. You must. You look like you would. In the beginning was the Word. And what is it then? And the Word was with God. And I think the Word was God, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So as I was thinking earlier today about what we're going to do here, I thought about, it'd be nice to mention that. Yeah, so, it's a bit esoteric, like little unclear. In the beginning was the Word, and what's the Word? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's a bit, it's not just like clear what exactly it means, like obviously. But at the very least, if we're talking about words, we're talking about sound. Yeah, we're talking about sound. So even there, well, not just even there, but there, sound is being given some recognition, put it that way. In the Islamic tradition, I'm not so familiar, so I couldn't say, but anyway, yeah, so I can't say. But definitely in the biblical, Christian, Judaic, for that matter, tradition, sound is there. And in the Vedic tradition, it's very central. So, back to just little old me in London, and now they've introduced me to this meditation using audible sound that you can hear. So I started doing it. The very first time, they gave me some beads. These are my beads. Anyway, some of my beads. These I've had not so long. What have I had them? 30 years? Something like that. And they were kind of not exactly white, but a little off-white color when I started on them 30 years ago. Yeah. And so now, they're well used. They're shiny. So they gave me some beads, and they said, yeah, we chant on these beads. Go for it. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll go for it. So I went for it. And so I chanted for half an hour on the beads. And my mind was all over, at least halfway over the universe, if not the whole way over the universe. And I thought, maybe it's not for me. Because it's the same problem. I can't focus my mind. But anyway, there were some other things which I found very interesting, some philosophical things, which I'll mention shortly about Bhagavad Gita, which I really found very interesting and struck me like philosophically as, this makes really, like you could say, objective sense. So anyway, I put it this way, I persevered. And I think it must have been, anyway, it was 3 or 4 weeks later of perseverance. One day, I was chanting on the beads audibly with a whole other group. There were like 50 or 60 people living in the premises, all young people. And I suddenly found, hey, my mind is focused on this mantra. My mind is focused. I'm really focused. And I'm not having to kind of force my mind, come on, don't think of this, don't think of that, come on. Not at all. It was just flowing. That was an amazing experience. And then I realized, yeah, that's what it's all about. At least that's an important part of what it's all about. Because the thing is, if you simply try to meditate within the mind, so you are trying now to focus the mind by the mind, rather than, now we have sound vibration, and we can get the attention of the mind because it's like an external thing to the mind. It's not just a mental function. It's a different type of function working on the mind. And therefore our experience is, me on January the 7th, it'll be 50 years actually. And my experience with, really a lot of people, I don't know how many, but many tens of thousands, is that with many people it works. With so many people it works that they're able to capture their attention and keep their attention on the mantra. It may take a little while, you may have to persevere, but with anything worthwhile, pretty much, you got to persevere a bit. So if you persevere, then you find, this is really good. And I must say, it's amazing, actually. So since that time, almost 50 years, I've been chanting on my beads, doing this meditation on my beads every day for at least 2 hours. And, believe it or not, in, let's just say 50 years, I haven't missed a day. Well, I had an operation at the end of April. 2 operations within 24 hours of each other. Sure. So I missed a few days. I chanted a few rounds, but I was just too wiped out. But then I caught up afterwards. So a couple of hours a day, 2 to 3 hours a day. And, you try, not for 50 years, you try for 1 year, or not even 1 year, you try for 6 months, or 3 months, or 1 month. Anyway, you try for a while, repeating something, anything. Not like one of the traditional mantras, but just something. Like one person trying to be like a smart aleck said to Prabhupada, well, why don't you just chant Coca-Cola? Yeah. So you could try Coca-Cola and report back after a while and let us know. I'd be interested to hear what's the experience like. But Prabhupada had an amazing sense of humor. And he said, if you chant Coca-Cola, 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 Coca-Cola for a few hours a day, Prabhupada said, you'll probably end up just being thirsty. Because it's not that special type of sound vibration which mantra is. Mantra is made up of the same letters of the alphabets, be it, our English alphabet, or in the Indian case, the old Sanskrit alphabet. The same letters of the alphabet that you use in normal conversation and in the newspapers and everything. But because of the arrangement of the syllables, they actually become spiritual sound vibration. And and some people say, well, it's the same syllables. How could it be spiritual? But the proof is in the pudding, particularly if the pudding's halava, then the proof is definitely there that, in the result you get. Which, and I am not. I mean, if you're sitting there thinking 50 years, 2 or 3 hours a day, this guy's got to be a robot. Well, I don't think I'm a robot. I really don't think I am. Which brings me to George Harrison, seeing you wanted me to tell that story. Yeah, George Harrison, the Beatles, and even, to this day, Paul McCartney, he's a good friend of our organization. He's a very good friend. And Ringo, to some degree. Mick Jagger used to be, but anyway, he was too much into marijuana. But George Harrison, he was really into it as a practitioner. Just such a shame he couldn't get off cigarettes, because he'd probably still be alive. Yeah, so anyway, I went with my sort of second cousin once removed, this one I mentioned, my distant relative. We went to visit, it was 1979, the end of 79, between Christmas and New Year, so we went to visit George Harrison in his place in a town called Henley-on-Thames. Yeah, his wife and son still live there. Big mansion called Friar Park or Friars Park. So we went to visit him. And we spent probably a good 3 hours with him, because he really loved talking about spiritual things. So he just dropped what he was doing and came and spoke with us for a good 3 hours. So at one point, I mean, I'm not trying to show off like I knew George Harrison, but he asked me to mention it. So we're talking to him, and I asked him, George, I mean, to the effect, like, how did you get into this? What happened? And so he said, yeah, we went to India. We got involved with TM, but we had some problems with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi personally. I mean, you can look that up if you want on Google, but they had some personal problems with him. And so they sort of dropped out to a large degree. So George said, yeah, we were there. And we got into mantras, and I really got into mantras, and particularly the Hare Krishna mantra, because as Sri Nityananda told you earlier, I heard him say it, it's got a special place amongst mantras. And it's not just that we, feel it's special, but it really is a fact. In the world of mantras, the big world of many mantras, it's known as the Maha Mantra, which means the great mantra. So George told us that he and John Lennon, they'd been to India at least once, maybe more than once, but at least once. And now they're back, and they were on some sort of cruise in the Mediterranean, as I recall. And one morning they woke up and they thought, hey, let's sing, let's chant Hare Krishna, Maha Mantra. Yeah, let's do it. So they started. It's like kind of 7 or 8 in the morning or so. So they started. Breakfast time came. They said, no. So they missed breakfast. They just carried on. Lunchtime came. They said, no. They were just too much into it. So they missed breakfast. Then dinner, like in the evening. And again, so they didn't eat anything the entire day. They're just sitting there singing. I mean, I guess they had a few toilet breaks, but other than that, they were just singing and playing their guitars. And they went through the night for about something like 22 hours, basically without stopping. And George said that the experience was so powerful, it just convinced him that this is real. Yeah. So I asked George, having been extremely familiar with the Beatles and their music, I said to him, George, what would it have been like if you had sung one of your Beatles songs for 22 hours? And in fact, I mentioned a particular song. Some of you who are my generation or thereabouts might remember, I Want to Hold Your Hand. Not very profound, but it was extremely popular. I mean, it was just fantastically popular. I bought it when I was young. So I said, what would it have been like if you had sung I Want to Hold Your Hand for 22 hours? And George laughed. And he just sort of, he looked and he thought momentarily. And you'd have to be familiar with the Beatles to know about this. George, he laughed and he thought and he said, well, I think it would have been a hard day's night. Which means it would have been tough, in other words. Yeah, it's been a hard day's night. I've been working like a dog. Anyway, it's okay. Let's not relive the past. Yeah, so that was an interesting experience. He was an interesting fellow. Yeah, really interesting fellow. So now, but this point is a very important point, and seeing you're all interested in mantras, and my experience is that it's a really worthwhile subject to get into. It is really worthwhile. Like anything and everything worthwhile, you got to persevere a bit. There's some ups and downs and things, and life has its challenges. But if you persevere, wow, what an amazing experience. It's just incredible. I mean, it's incomparable, really. Yeah, really incomparable in the sense, specifically in the sense that, all the popular songs, I don't know what's popular now. I hope it's not Kanye West still. The guy seems to be kind of off his rocker or something. Unfortunately, I keep up with current events. He's lost it. I think he lost it quite some time ago. So, but, I was a hit parade man for a while until I dropped out of dropping out. Yeah, I dropped out. I stopped. I retired. I retired at the age of 21 in the sense that I stopped working. And I seriously haven't worked since. Yeah. And I had no intention of working anymore because I was a confirmed hippie, pretty much. So, but yeah, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Elton John, and all these people, I saw them live. They all came to New Zealand. The Beatles came twice, and various others. And, these records get onto the hit parade, and then they go off. And in some cases, like some really big ones, like the Beatles, they come back after some years. There's a resurgence of interest, and then it dies out again. And then there's a resurgence. But otherwise, most of them They're on the hit parade, then they're forgotten. Yeah. So, and they're forgotten because people lose taste. They just don't get from them what they got from them initially for a while. And it just becomes like, I don't want to listen to it anymore. And so the new one comes and it's like, oh yeah, great, wow, for a while. But with mantra, if you get into it, and with any, there are different categories of mantras. There are mantras like, if you know a bit about, if you got a little experience with mantras, you would have heard of the mantra Om Namo Shivaya. You heard of that one? It's well known. Yeah. Om Namo Shivaya. It's offering respect to Lord Shiva, who is, one of the greater universal personalities. But it's material because he is a material person. He's not a transcendental being. Yeah. So when you chant that mantra, even specifically, you can't do it for long. Certainly not like in my case, and it's not just me, but however many thousands or millions have been chanting, particularly the Maha Mantra, for like 40 years, 50 years, even just 20 years or 30 years. Yeah, the experience is that every day it's just really good. It's just really nice. Every day. You get up early in the morning and have a shower and put on clean clothes, go sit down and chant, and it's really nice. It's just really nice. And it's not like, all right, that's enough of that mantra. What's the next mantra? But, there's many mantras, but even just that one, you can really get into, and go on indefinitely, literally indefinitely. And not just go on like sort of manage it, but it actually gets better. Yeah. The experience becomes deeper and more enjoyable. Really, it is just amazing. So therefore, my recommendation, suggestion, advice, or whatever you might call it, let's just say suggestion, because, I don't want to appear to be too dogmatic, is that try audible meditation, and you'll find, at least the vast majority, find that it's just easier to maintain focus without having to sort of bash your mind and shout at your mind and tell your mind, Here's another funny little story. You'll like this one. What was it? 84, end of 84, me and a couple of other of my colleagues, we were in Cape Town raising funds to build our main temple, which is now there in Durban in Chatsworth. So we were doing an exhibition from late November through into early January, and we had our spot in the Golden Acre, if you know Cape Town. So there we were, every day, 7 days a week. But one day they moved us for the day. They moved us down to next to the music shop. So there we were, we're right by the door to the music shop. It's a big open doorway. And for some reason, that day, someone in that shop decided to play the entire day from when they opened, like 8 o'clock or 8:30, till they closed at 5-ish or whatever, to play one song loud and clear the entire day. And would you believe it was Stevie Wonder? I just called to say I love you the whole day. And we were just right by the door. So the whole day I heard, I just called to say I love you. And I was never a Stevie Wonder fan. You know, I was more into the rock groups and Leslie West, if you ever heard of him. He just died too. But you know, I mean, it was okay. He's okay, Stevie Wonder. Yeah, he's all right. So we went home. We were staying in Rondebosch. And we went home on the train to Rondebosch. And there I am sitting, trying to meditate. Yes, trying to meditate. And so I'm sitting there, yes, you know, mantras going on. And suddenly I realized in my mind is going. I just called to say, and I had to tell myself, no, focus on them. So I mean, I got it together. It's all right. It did take a bit of effort, but I did get it together to get my mind back focused. Yes. So, but this is the thing. Meditation, you know, it's really good as long as you get into it. If you can't get into it, then I guess like anything else, it's sort of, you know, it's not something you want to do. But the audible, chanting mantras audibly, wow, it has such a, I'd say not 10 times, definitely more than 10 times the impact on the consciousness than simply trying to chant silently within the mind. Having said that, you know, we teach meditation, and people who are practicing, you know, on a daily basis, we have generally 2 levels of initiation. Generally 2. The first is after, you know, someone's been practicing like a year, and the second is 6 months or maybe another year after. And at the second initiation, because now they're practiced with the audible mantras, now they're used to it, and they're in the swing of it. They're in the flow of it, because it's like that, like a flow. And so then we teach them silent meditation, a different form, different mantras. In fact, the silent meditation we teach, there are 7 mantras. 7 mantras which we give people at one time. And because then by that time, they should be able, and generally they're able, to focus, even though it's just within the mind, because they're attuned to it. They're used to it. Yeah. So there you go, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Some thoughts on this subject. And, you know, let me just conclude by saying, give me another couple of minutes. And, you know, in Bhagavad Gita, if you're familiar with Bhagavad Gita, you're familiar with Bhagavad Gita, right? Right. Yeah. You're familiar with Bhagavad Gita. You are too, aren't you? All right. Anyway, in Bhagavad Gita, in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, particularly the 2nd chapter, there's 18 chapters. In the 2nd chapter, Krishna the speaker, he really emphasizes and clarifies that, as Sri Nityananda said, we are not these bodies, but these bodies are vehicles, and we're like the drivers, so to speak. Not absolutely like that, but, you get the idea. It's not a bad example. Just like we all came here by cars. We got all the cars parked out on the road. We all came here by some form of transport. We were the drivers. Now we're here and the car is there. Right? So me and my car, we are not one. We're definitely two. So, So I am the soul, or Atma in Sanskrit. Atma is like the driver in the car. The car is the body, or in Sanskrit, Sharira. But the problem is, and it's like the classical problem, is that people, even though people talk about my body, my head, my arm, my leg, and my body, and my mind. Mine, it's all my. But when you ask someone, we did a demo, didn't we, last Saturday with you? Let's do it again. Just stand up for 1 minute. We'll do a demo. Watch this. This is Yogendra. He is what is it again? What do you do?
Logistics analyst.
He's a logistics analyst, so technically minded. So, Yogendra, point to your left arm. That's right. Point to your chest. Point to your head. Point to your right leg. Now indicate your whole body. Okay. Now point to you. Now that's your chest. You said that's your chest. We want you to point to you. That's your chest. Wake up. You insist, is it? Why don't you indicate your whole body and try and convince me that's you? No, because you said that's your body. Okay, you can sit down. Well done. He's good. So there's this problem, and people don't understand it's a problem, but they're living this problem every day. That it's my arm, my leg, my head, my chest, my body, my. So where's me? Here? No, that's your chest. Here? Inside here. No, that's my mind. So it's a case of, what do they call it? It's sort of like a schizophrenic state, technically speaking, in psychological terms, that you think you are something you are not. When in my young days, there was another very minor rock star. His name, I think he called himself Napoleon the Fourth or something. Napoleon something. And he would go on stage, Napoleon had his hand in his jacket like that. And he would sing like or it was sort of rap even. He would just speak like he was insane. Like, I am Napoleon, I am this. And he was fairly popular because there were quite a few insane people around in those days, like today. Split personality. So people are literally living in a condition of literally split personality. That me and what is mine are not two two, but one. But they're not one, they're two. Yeah. So Krishna makes that point in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, particularly the second chapter. And the thing is that the meditation, we can go into that in detail sometime in the future, but in regard to the meditation, like I said, the experience is really nice. It's really amazing, and it gets better even. And the mind clears, the anxieties sort of just dissolve away. And you feel happiness. It's just clear that you feel happy. But where's it coming from? It's not coming from, eating something nice, drinking something. It's not coming from smoking something or that sort of just sensory, stimulating the senses. It's coming from within. You are actually stimulating your spiritual nature. Yeah. And that is starting to come through. Yeah. And that's why it feels good. And that's why it feels really good as the more you get into it. You got to get into it. But the more you get into it, the more you see that it actually feels good. And it's not just a belief. Like when you eat something, if you are hungry, really hungry, and you eat something, now you're not hungry. So it's not a belief. You don't say, no, well, I believe I'm not hungry. It's just reality. So like this, our spiritual internal nature is stimulated. It's not just our blood flow. It's not just the nervous system, but it's something much deeper. It's our spiritual nature. And that's the essence of mantra meditation. We stimulate our spiritual nature within, and we get experience from it. And the experience is, wow, it really is quite something. So, go for it. Yes, go for it. It's great. And let me just conclude by saying we have chanting sessions in the mornings, at least whenever I'm in South Africa, 7 mornings a week, and at least 5, if not 6 evenings. And in fact, we're going to do it tonight. I don't know, we'll see, maybe 6 o'clock or so. But we start about shortly after 4 in the morning, go to 7 in the morning, 7 days a week. Then 5 to 6 in the evenings, late afternoon. Monday to Friday and usually Sunday, sometimes Saturday. And we're on Facebook. Yeah. Would you believe? Look, I've got a computer. Wow. And it's actually a good computer. I actually know a lot about computers, I'm afraid. And technology and all. We're currently broadcasting, you see, using 7 modems at once. Yes, this is high-tech bonding, internet bonding. So join us tonight, tomorrow morning, Facebook, Zoom, Telegram, and even some Russian things. The contactor is Russian. Haribol. See you there. Okay, well, thanks very much for listening very patiently. Hope I didn't put you to sleep or bore you or make you, upset you or anything. And I wish you all the best. Haribol.